WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisCI to 44321.
Alan Kupsik of Lake Geneva is the Democratic candidate for the 33rd Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Alan Kupsik, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, thank you for participating in our candidate interview.
I always look forward to these.
What's your campaign's key message while you're running for this office?
Well, our key message is we started off as to give people a choice. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is that there's only one letter on the ballot. So, and not only that, but because of the map changes, Lake Geneva was added to 3 or 4 different communities. So, again, the choice was one of the reasons. Second reason is I was concerned about the future. There's a lot of issues that are out there regarding education, regarding public safety, and regarding women's rights. And I just thought that whatever good I have left in me, it could be a good fit to work on some of these problems.
So if you're elected, what's an example of a bill that would be a priority for you to introduce?
Well, there's a number of them that you could really talk about. One of the things that I've run across so far in my campaign is education. A lot of people are concerned that our school system, public school system, is not being funded properly. One of the things that I promised is that I would definitely try to do my best to look into funding public schools again. I'd also like to look into revamping the voucher system. There's some issues with that are creating a problem for public schools because all the money is going to the voucher system and not going to the public schools. So if I had to do something, that would be probably the first thing I would start with.
Well, maybe you've already answered this question. The state has a more than $3 billion projected surplus. What would be your top 2 priorities for use of that funding?
Well, I think like anything else, it would be nice to give everyone a tax rebate and get some of that money back into the taxpayers' hands, which would be great in a perfect world. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that need to get done in Wisconsin. My suggestion would be to somehow come up with a plan to give some of it back to the taxpayers and keep some of it on hand for infrastructure, for schools. Infrastructure is going to be a big key issue. Healthcare is another thing. I think we'll get into that later, but those would be the areas that I would try to fund that or funnel that money to. You've
mentioned K-12 education as a priority. What do you think is working well in education and what maybe needs to change?
Well, I think what I see is it's not working well. A lot of teachers, retired teachers and administrators from the public schools are saying that without funding, they have to lay off teachers, they have to cut classes. There's a lot of things that are happening because of the funding situation. So I think in order to get the K-12 back into being productive again, we have to do something about funding. And we have to make sure that schools at least have enough funding to just get the basic operations, the lights, the water, and the personnel that you need just to keep the buildings going.
What about the state's higher education system, that system of four-year colleges, two-year colleges, technical colleges? What does the future of that system look like to you, and where should the legislature focus?
Well, the future for that, it looks wonderful. As long as we, again, as long as we can maintain it and fund it properly. UW-Madison is probably one of the best schools in the United States. That would be a shame to lose any of the facilities there. Same thing with the two-year college and the like Gateway and the technical colleges. We need to keep all of those functional. We need to keep them operational, and we need to provide the highest form of education that we possibly can. And I think the legislature does have the ability to put some of that funding back towards the schools to keep everything operational.
You support increasing funding for the universities of Wisconsin
Absolutely,
system?
absolutely, yes.
What do you see as the state's largest workforce development challenge, and how would you propose to address it?
The biggest challenge they have is trying to find people to do all the work. I'm in the, unfortunately, I still work, and I'm in a construction business, and I have been for over 40 years. And I have never seen a shortage in manpower like we have now. And when I say shortage, I'm referring more to the construction industry, because that's what I'm familiar with right now. And I see that companies are struggling to keep good employees or to get employees. And like I said, those are things that we just have to make Wisconsin more open for young people to understand that they can get a good job, they can get a good education. It doesn't necessarily have to be college. It could be a trade school, it could be a union apprenticeship or whatever out there that's offered. So they've got their challenges. And
what should the state do about it?
Well, I think the only thing that the state can do at this point is oversee the development and the workforce development, and make sure that the rules are followed, make sure that everything's in order, and make sure that they're doing everything possible to make the jobs that are on the list available to everyone.
Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow our state's economy. This also provides an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there are no requirements for hiring local workers. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and utility scale infrastructure investments?
Absolutely. The problem with the energy, like the solar farms and energy projects, is that they're privately funded. So they don't necessarily have to follow the same rules as a public project would. Typically, on a public project, they would require wage
requirement?
Yes, wage requirements that would keep everything equal. And they can also mandate that they would have to have so many residents working on that particular job. So, like I said, there's a big difference. There's no reason why the energy companies that are providing these solar farms and alternate sources, I'm sure there's something that could be negotiated or figured out to include local people working. I think the biggest issue there is your rural areas. Most of these big wind farms and solar farms are out in rural areas, and I think it would be to our best interest to get people that live out there involved and get them to work on those projects. And that can all be done through the union as well. Sometimes the local unions in the rural areas, they can provide the help to those particular projects.
Employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as independent contractors or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, and it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this issue? And
yes, I am aware of that issue, and I think I don't have an answer as far as how you, again, it has to go back to workforce development to monitor these things and police these things. Sometimes employers will take advantage of people and call them contractors. And technically, when you go to work for someone, you are not a contractor, you are an employee. And so I look at it myself. I signed on for a contract a couple years ago with a electrical contractor that was out of state. But I knew what I was getting ahead of time. My contract consisted of my hourly wage, my benefits, and everything else, and I got paid with a check, not with cash. So again, that's something that needs to be monitored and needs to be policed by the development. And I think it's a shame that an employer would do that to someone and compromise their safety and health because they're looking for cheap labor is what it amounts to.
Affordable rental housing is an issue in Wisconsin. Some support government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. What is your sense of housing as an issue and which best addresses rental housing affordability? Is it rent control or building more rentals or some other solution?
Well, ideally, I think it would be to everyone's best interest to build more affordable homes, no questions asked. The problem with that is that how do you keep the cost down? A developer or a contractor comes in, they buy a piece of land, they build a house, they build homes, they want to get as much as they can out of that. I think there has to be some type of joint effort between the state and a developer to work together, maybe some tax incentives or something to create the affordable housing. Rent is another thing. And not only that, just to get back to housing, there's not enough housing. So people that are selling houses now are getting way above what the asking price should be. And that's going to be an issue. I was reading some statistics, and what I read is we need about 4 million homes built. The federal government is only going to provide enough funding for 3 million. What happens to the other million? And the rent, it's another, because of the fact that there aren't enough apartments out there, and landlords, they have to do maintenance, they have to provide all the amenities that they need to keep the building going, and it's tough. Again, tax breaks and working with developers and apartment owners to put a cap on the rent and hopefully, like I said, make it more affordable for everyone.
Moving on to healthcare.
Oh.
Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures?
Well, right now that is a big problem. Healthcare, and not so much in the cities, but in the rural areas. Hospitals are closing, clinics are closing, and again, it all comes back to funding. They need money to fund that. Going back quite a few years ago, Governor Walker refused to take some federal money from the government to put it towards the Affordable Care Act, also to fund some of Medicare and Medicaid, which would have been payments to these local hospitals as well as the rural hospitals. Just like anything else, the state would have to go back to the drawing board and come up with something. I think if you work with the health providers and you work with the insurance companies, there's got to be a compromise there somewhere. And when I say we, the state cannot afford to lose hospitals, clinics. People that live in rural areas, especially, they get sick, something happens, they have to be less than an hour away. And unfortunately, right now, that's a problem.
Do you support increasing the Medicaid reimbursement rate to hospitals?
Absolutely, yes.
Mental health care, growing concern for Wisconsinites, concern for state and county budgets. What are you hearing on this issue, and how would you address it?
It's funny you bring that up because tonight NAMI has got a forum on mental health right here in Racine, and we'll be attending that tonight along with other candidates. It's a big issue. It is a major issue. And I think we, as a state, we have to come up with something, because what happens, we find out about mental health issues after the damage is done. For example, some of these school shootings, some of these mass shootings. A lot of times, after if the shooter itself or the person that's causing the problem is caught and alive, most of the times, well, he had a mental problem or she had a mental problem. I think the key is to get on. We need to get everyone on board with that. If you see something, say something. If you feel that you have a problem, you should tell somebody about it, and hopefully catch it before it turns into a disaster. Again, going back to the construction industry, in the last couple of years, we have been made aware of the suicide rate, depression, and things of that nature, and mental health, and suicide rate being up in the construction business. And like I said, there's a lot of reasons for being depressed and whatnot, but again, that's something that I think the state needs to work on.
Abortion policy. How should Wisconsin move forward on the issue of abortion?
Well, I only have one stance on that, and there shouldn't be an abortion issue whatsoever. They ought to remove the ban on abortions that goes back to 1849. And as far as I'm concerned, the only people that should be involved when it comes to an abortion is the woman, her significant other, a doctor, and God, and that's it.
So no state-imposed week limit on abortion?
No, absolutely not.
What are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is it that these needs are addressed, and for the state to keep on schedule in the reconstruction of aging interstates and significant corridors of commerce?
Well, I think transportation in our area seems to be pretty well. I mean, I travel 94, 43, the major expressways into interstates into downtown Milwaukee, and so there's always something going on. Evidently, there's enough money there. Again, going back to what I said earlier about the additional funds that are sitting there now, there should be money in that fund that should be put aside for roads, not only our roads, but rural roads and the towns and villages, outside of the cities. That's our main source to get to and from work, and they should be well kept.
PFAS and other water contaminants are a concern for a growing number of Wisconsinites. Do you see this as an important issue, and how would you propose to address it?
I see it as an important issue because I think Wisconsinites deserve clean water, clean air, and whatnot. I was doing some research on that, and our limits, our parts per trillion, are down very low. But there is still a source that could potentially be a problem in the future. Again, that's something that the state would have to monitor. That's something that we would have to keep an eye on. And the state would have to do their best as far as the environmental department goes, or whoever maintains that, to keep an eye on it and make sure the levels don't go above what they're supposed to be.
We're down to our final two questions. How would you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
Well, I don't know my opponent personally. I've met him a couple times. He seems like a nice guy. I don't have any issues with him. I think the difference is, I think one of the issues that we're having right now is that things are not getting done. There's a lot of work in the legislature that's been passed over, been brushed off to the side, and it's not getting done. If I'm elected, I'll go to work for the people that put me in there. We need to get both Republicans and Democrats working together again. This drawing a line in the sand and you stay on your side and you stay doesn't work. We need to go back to working together and crossing the line. I think with my ability and my experience in the construction business and my experience in the past, I've served on a county board in Walworth County. I was an alderman in Lake Geneva for 6 years, and I also served as a mayor for 2 years. So that kind of puts my hand on the pulse of things and how things get done, and I think that gives me the advantage.
So if you're elected and you get this magic wand you can use in the state capitol on one issue that brings all people, all parties together, what's the issue?
That's a tough one. I would take that magic wand out and that pile of money that's sitting there, and I would turn it into fairy dust and just have it go out throughout the whole state. I wish it was that easy, but I'm kidding. It's hard to say. There's so many different things that need to be looked at and need to be done. And I think, like I said, if I did have that magic wand, I think I would definitely lean towards education, because I think right now there's other issues. There's no question about it, but education is the backbone of this state. And if we cannot provide a quality education for our kids coming up and our future grandchildren and whatnot, then we are definitely not doing a good job.
Well, thank you, Alan Kupsik of Lake Geneva, the Democratic candidate for the 33rd Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Alan Kupsik, thank you for talking with WisconsinEye.
Thank you very much.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.